I caught my sister on camera drugging and trying to seduce my boyfriend. Now my family is torn apart. I've always been the afterthought in my family. The second daughter, the second choice, the constant runner-up to Isabel's gold medal existence. Even now, at 28, with everything most women dream of, a corner office at a prestigious marketing firm, looks that turn heads, and a man who makes my heart race, I'm still invisible when I walk through my parents' front door. Lena, honey, did you see the new photos of Isabel? Doesn't she look stunning? Mom gushes, barely glancing at my promotion announcement. Dad nods absently, his eyes fixed on my sister lounging on the couch like it's her personal throne. Perfect Isabel. Beautiful Isabel. The family crown jewel who dropped out of college to marry Jeremy? That rich idiot who left her 3 years later? Now she's unemployed, living off our parents and somehow still their shining star. I thought things would change when I moved away for college. They didn't. I built my life brick by careful brick, climbing corporate ladders while Isabel climbed in and out of our parents' bank accounts. My success only fueled her jealousy. Our rivalry started early. In 4th grade, Isabel accidentally spilled juice on my science project the night before it was due. When I got a B- instead of my usual A, she hugged me with a smirk hidden from Mom. Maybe you're just not cut out for science, sis. Every achievement of mine became her target. Every boyfriend, every award, every promotion, Isabel found ways to tarnish them all. Her beauty and charm were weapons, and she wielded them with precision. Then I met Elliot. Kind, brilliant Elliot, who looks at me like I'm the sun. For the first time, I found someone who sees me, really sees me. I haven't brought him home yet, knowing what, or rather who, waits there. Last night, my phone buzzed with a text from Isabel. Heard you're dating someone new, can't wait to meet him? My stomach dropped. Somehow, she already knows about Elliot. The game has begun again, but this time, I won't let her win. This time, I'll protect what's mine. The marketing department at Reynolds & Berg became my sanctuary. There, my ideas mattered. There, I was valued. After 3 years of 70-hour weeks and sacrificed weekends, I earned my promotion to senior marketing strategist. My colleagues celebrated with champagne and genuine smiles, something my family had never offered. Then came the Chicago conference that changed everything. I was presenting our new campaign when I noticed him in the 3rd row, dark eyes focused intently on my slides, nodding slightly at my key points. Elliot Chen, creative director from the New York office. When he approached afterward with thoughtful questions and a smile that made my chest tighten, I knew I was in trouble. Your approach to the millennial segment was brilliant, he said, his voice warm and confident. Would you consider discussing it over dinner? One dinner became 5, then weekend trips to coastal towns with quaint bookshops and hidden restaurants. Elliot listened when I spoke, really listened. He remembered details about my childhood dreams, my coffee preferences, my favorite authors. For the first time, I felt truly seen. You're remarkable, Lena, he told me one night as we walked along the pier, moonlight silvering the waves. I've never met anyone who thinks the way you do. 3 months in, Elliot mentioned meeting my family. I deflected with jokes about demanding work schedules and rain checks. How could I explain that bringing him home meant offering him up to Isabel's inspection, to her inevitable interference? My phone buzzed with her text that same evening. How did she know? I'd been so careful not to mention Elliot on social media or family calls. Isabel always had her ways, friends of friends, distant connections, perhaps even following my Instagram stories, though I'd blocked her official account. The thought of Isabel meeting Elliot made my stomach clench. I'd seen her work before, casual touches, intimate glances, stories that painted me as unstable or needy. She'd stolen 2 boyfriends in college using these exact tactics, then discarded them once she'd proven she could. Why haven't I met your family yet? Elliot asked last night over takeout in my apartment. His eyes held no accusation, only curiosity. I'd like to know where you come from. I pushed noodles around my container. It's complicated. My family is intense. I can handle intense, he smiled, taking my hand. I'd like to meet them next weekend. No more excuses. As I nodded, dread pooled in my stomach. I imagined Isabel's predatory smile, her calculated charm. The battle lines were being drawn, and this time, the stakes felt impossibly high. Fine, I said, squeezing his hand. Next Saturday, but promise me something? Anything. Remember who I am, no matter what you hear. He looked confused but agreed. If only he knew what was coming. If only I could protect him from the hurricane that was my sister. Saturday arrived with a knot of anxiety tightening in my chest. I spent an hour choosing my outfit, settling on a forest green dress that Elliot once said brought out my eyes. As we drove to my parents' house, I squeezed his hand so hard my knuckles turned white. Your family can't be that bad, he laughed, kissing my fingers. You're overreacting. If only he knew. My phone pinged with a text from Isabel. Can't wait to meet your new man. Wearing that red dress you always said made me look like a movie star. XOXO. The message was clear. Battle lines drawn. Mom greeted us with her usual distracted hug, but Dad at least made an effort, shaking Elliot's hand firmly. Then Isabel descended the stairs in that damned red dress, her entrance timed for maximum impact. You must be Elliot, she purred, extending her hand. I've heard absolutely nothing about you. Her laugh tinkled like broken glass as her eyes raked over him appraisingly. I felt myself tense as she leaned in for a hug that lasted seconds too long. Throughout dinner, Isabel positioned herself directly across from Elliot, leaning forward to give him her full attention and an eyeful of cleavage. When I tried sitting next to him, she quickly slid into the chair first. Oh, I thought you were getting the wine, she said innocently. When I glared, she reluctantly moved, but not before brushing against Elliot's shoulder. Lena mentioned you work in marketing too, my father said to Elliot, actually showing interest. Before Elliot could answer, Isabel jumped in. I've always been fascinated by marketing. In fact, I was just telling Mom I'm thinking of going back to school for it. I nearly choked on my water. Isabel had never expressed interest in marketing before tonight. Really? Mom beamed. That's wonderful, sweetheart. Isabel turned to Elliot. Maybe you could give me some advice sometime? I'd love to pick your brain over coffee. The audacity was breathtaking. I clenched my jaw as she continued her performance. You know, Elliot, it's so strange how much we have in common, Isabel said, twirling her wine glass. We both love jazz, right? Lena mentioned you're a huge fan. I've been collecting vinyl for years. Elliot looked confused. Actually, I'm more into indie rock. Isabel recovered seamlessly. Oh, that too. I just saw that new band. What were they called again? Throughout dinner, she peppered her conversation with accidental touches of Elliot's arm and meaningful glances. Her comments became increasingly pointed. Lena was always so serious growing up, she said with a theatrical sigh. I tried to help her loosen up, but some people just can't take a joke. Elliot squeezed my knee under the table. I find her sense of humor one of her most attractive qualities, he replied smoothly. After dinner, I excused myself to help Mom with dessert. When I returned, Isabel was nowhere to be seen. Neither was Elliot. I found them on the back porch, Isabel standing too close as she showed him something on her phone. I can't seem to find my phone anywhere, she was saying. Could you call it for me? As Elliot reached for his phone, our eyes met. His expression was unreadable. I stood frozen, watching as Isabel moved closer, her hand resting lightly on his arm. Elliot, I called, my voice steadier than I felt. Could you help me with something in the kitchen? Isabel shot me a venomous look. The game was just beginning, and I knew with chilling certainty that she was playing to win. The next 2 weeks passed with a fragile peace. Elliot seemed unfazed by Isabel's behavior, which only increased my anxiety. Had he not noticed her advances, or worse, had he enjoyed them? When Elliot suggested a small dinner party at his apartment with his college roommate, Marcus, I agreed immediately. A night away from my family's dysfunction sounded perfect. Your sister asked for my number, Elliot mentioned casually as we prepared dinner. She wanted restaurant recommendations for a client meeting. My stomach clenched. And you gave it to her? It seemed harmless. He shrugged, not understanding the weight of his words. I was in the shower when the doorbell rang. I heard muffled voices. Marcus must have arrived early. Rushing to finish, I wrapped a towel around my hair and slipped into my dress. When I emerged, I froze. Isabel stood in Elliot's living room, stunning in a black dress I'd never seen. Surprise, she trilled. Elliot mentioned your little get-together. I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd join. Elliot looked uncomfortable but managed a polite smile. Isabel brought wine. How thoughtful, I said through clenched teeth. Marcus arrived minutes later, sizing up the tension immediately. His eyes narrowed at Isabel, who was already pouring drinks. Here, she said, handing Elliot a glass. I made it special. Elliot hesitated. I'm good with water tonight, presentation tomorrow. Isabel pushed the glass into his hand. One sip won't hurt. I added something to make it. Her eyes glinted. Interesting. Alarm bells rang in my head as Elliot reluctantly took a small sip to be polite. Within 20 minutes, he was rubbing his temples, his words slightly slurred. I need a minute, he mumbled, heading to the bathroom. I moved to follow, but Isabel placed a hand on my arm. Let me check the appetizers. They're burning. Nothing was burning, I knew it, but stepped into the kitchen anyway, watching Isabel through the doorway as she approached the bathroom. When Elliot emerged looking disoriented, she was waiting. She touched his face, whispering something that made him step back, but his movements were clumsy, his eyes unfocused. You look flushed, she said loudly enough for me to hear. Let me help you to the couch. Her hands were everywhere, his chest, his shoulders, his face. When she stumbled, pressing herself against him, I started forward, fury building. Suddenly, Marcus was there, phone in hand, recording everything. I think that's enough, he said coldly. Elliot, sit down. You've been drugged. Isabel's face transformed from seductive to venomous. What are you talking about? He's just tired. I installed security cameras last week after my place was broken into, Marcus said, pointing to a small device on the bookshelf. Been streaming to my phone all night. Isabel's eyes widened. You can't... Can't what? Record someone trying to drug and sexually assault my friend? Marcus's voice was steel. Get out before I call the police. Isabel fled, leaving behind her purse and a deafening silence. The video Marcus showed me made me physically ill. Isabel slipping something into Elliot's drink, her hands wandering as she pressed him against the wall, Elliot trying to push her away despite his compromised state. She could have... I couldn't finish the sentence, hands shaking as I helped Elliot drink water. I've seen enough predators to recognize one, Marcus said grimly. This isn't her first time. Hours later, with Elliot sleeping off whatever Isabel had given him, I sat in his darkened living room, the truth settling over me like ash. This wasn't just jealousy or competition. This was dangerous obsession. My phone lit up with a text from Isabel. It wasn't what it looked like. We need to talk alone. I stared at the message, rage and grief battling inside me. For the first time in my life, I saw Isabel clearly, not as the perfect sister I could never match, but as someone broken and dangerous. Tomorrow, I would confront her. But tonight, watching Elliot's chest rise and fall in sleep, I made a silent promise. This was the last time Isabel would ever hurt someone I loved. Morning arrived with Elliot still groggy but recovering. The haunting images from Marcus's video replayed in my mind. Isabel's calculated movements, the predatory gleam in her eyes, Elliot's confusion as he tried to resist her advances. We need to tell your parents, Elliot said quietly over coffee. This isn't just sibling rivalry anymore. I nodded, sick with dread. I know. We drove to my parents' house in silence. Isabel's car was already in the driveway. Mom greeted us with her usual distracted smile, but Dad seemed to sense the tension immediately. When we gathered in the living room, Isabel lounged on the sofa, the picture of casual innocence. We need to talk, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. About what happened last night? Isabel's eyes flashed with warning. Nothing happened. Elliot was tired, that's all. I connected Marcus's phone to the TV, watching Isabel's face drain of color as the footage began to play. My mother gasped when Isabel slipped something into Elliot's drink. My father's jaw clenched as she pressed herself against him, hands wandering where they had no right to be. When the video ended, silence hung heavy in the room. This is clearly edited, Isabel finally said, her voice brittle. I was just helping Elliot sit down. He'd had too much to drink. I had one sip of the drink you gave me, Elliot replied quietly. Whatever was in it wasn't alcohol. Mom's hands trembled as she reached for Isabel. Sweetheart, what were you thinking? I didn't do anything wrong. Isabel's voice rose, eyes darting between our parents. Lena's always been jealous of me. She's making this seem worse than it was. The familiar script, Isabel blameless, Lena overreacting, unfolded yet again. But this time I refused to play my part. No, I said, my voice cutting through her excuses. I've spent my entire life watching you take whatever you wanted, Isabel, my toys, my achievements, my boyfriends, but drugging Elliot, that's criminal. My father stood, his face ashen. Isabel, is this true? Daddy, of course not, you know me. Isabel's voice took on the little girl quality that always worked on him. Not today. I've seen enough, Dad said, his voice heavy with disappointment. I can't keep making excuses for you, Isabel. This has to stop. Mom wrung her hands. Let's not overreact. Isabel wouldn't. Mom, stop, my voice cracked. She did. She always has. And if you keep defending her, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. Isabel's face contorted with rage. You ungrateful bitch! I've always been there for you. By sabotaging everything good in my life? I laughed without humor. That's not being there for me, Isabel. That's destroying me to make yourself feel better. Your sister needs help, not judgment, Mom insisted, still unable to see the truth. Dad shook his head. No, Carol. What Isabel needs is consequences, for once in her life. The battle lines were drawn, Dad and I on one side, Mom and Isabel on the other. The family fracture I'd feared my whole life was finally happening. If she stays, I go, I said simply. I won't let her hurt anyone else I care about. Isabel's eyes narrowed. You think this is over? You've always been pathetic, Lena. Playing the victim. Poor little sister, always in my shadow. She grabbed her purse. This isn't finished. As she stormed out, Mom followed, pleading for understanding. Dad sat heavily on the couch, looking suddenly older. I'm sorry, Lena. I should have seen this years ago. The apology I'd waited a lifetime to hear felt hollow now, with our family splintered beyond repair. Elliot took my hand. What now? I looked at the door where Isabel had disappeared, feeling a strange mixture of grief and liberation. Now we protect ourselves. Because Isabel isn't done. This was just the beginning. Dad nodded grimly. I'll talk to your mother, make her understand. But we all knew some wounds couldn't be healed with words. Some betrayals cut too deep. Isabel's final glare promised retribution. The question wasn't if she would strike again, but when, and how devastating the blow would be. 6 months later, I stood before a mirror in my wedding dress, my father waiting to walk me down the aisle. My mother had finally come around, though the family remained fractured. Isabel hadn't been invited, hadn't called, hadn't apologized. You look beautiful, Dad said, his eyes misty. I'm sorry it took me so long to see clearly. I squeezed his hand. We're here now. That's what matters. As we walked down the aisle, I searched the gathered faces, half expecting Isabel to appear, to create one final scene. But she didn't come. The space where she should have been as my maid of honor remained empty, filled instead by my closest friend from work. Elliot's eyes locked with mine as I approached, filled with such certainty that my lingering fears dissolved. We'd weathered the worst storm already. Nothing could touch us now. I promise to see you, truly see you, every day for the rest of our lives, Elliot vowed, his voice steady and sure. After years of invisibility, being truly seen felt like coming home. Our honeymoon in Portugal passed in sun-drenched bliss, no shadows of family drama following us across the ocean. When we returned, we moved into our new apartment, building a life without the constant threat of Isabel's interference. Mom still mentions her name sometimes, still holds out hope for reconciliation. She's your sister, she reminds me during our monthly calls. Blood doesn't excuse what she did, I always answer. The hardest lesson wasn't cutting Isabel out. It was accepting that some people are poison, even when you love them. Even when they're family. Last week, I saw Isabel across a crowded restaurant. Our eyes met briefly before she turned away, disappearing into the crowd. No confrontation, no drama, just two strangers who once shared a home. I don't know if she's changed or if she's simply found new targets for her manipulation. What I do know is that I'm no longer hers to torment. You okay? Elliot had asked, noticing my sudden stillness. Yes, I'd answered, surprised to find it was true. I really am. The sister who haunted my childhood no longer has power over me. The life I've built with Elliot is stronger than her jealousy, more real than her deceptions. Some days I still grieve for the relationship Isabel and I might have had in another life. But I've learned that sometimes the happiest endings don't include everyone from the beginning of the story. Sometimes they can't.